Another edition of Behind the Lines presented by TheLines.com and BetMGM Sportsbook. I'm Eli Hershkovich, joined as always by Christian Cipollini, trading manager at BetMGM. We saw it on Monday night. Terrible teams continue to underperform the market's expectations, with the Cowboys getting blown out by Houston. I'm assuming it was a pretty bad result for BetMGM on Monday Night Football.
Yeah, that one was definitely not good. Although it's interesting because years past, pretty much any other year, the Cowboys losing is typically a good thing for the book, but it has not been the case this season, especially with Cooper Rush as quarterback. So last night was a bad one. Yeah.
Jerry Jones might have thought so too with what happened to his stadium pregame with, I think, a bar from the roof falling off. Kind of a microcosm of the Cowboys season. But looking ahead to Week 12, Christian, speaking of big favorites, nearly 40% of the point spreads in Week 12 are of a touchdown or more, and that applies to the Houston Texans. We saw Houston beat up on Dallas, as we discussed to begin the podcast. 7-4, Houston 5-1 against the spread this season. 8.5-point favorites at BetMGM against the 2-8 Tennessee Titans. The Titans are 1-9 against the spread, one of the 5 worst ATS starts in the Super Bowl era. So literally, how many Titans bets have you taken so far? How many people are willing to defend Will Levis against a pretty formidable Houston defense?
Yeah, the answer is not many, to pretty close to not at all. Yeah, especially early in the week, we don't tend to take a lot of bets, and especially we don't tend to take a lot of bets on bad teams like this. If anything, if someone's looking to bet this team, they might want to do it later, hoping that this line will continue to move with the Texans and toward the Texans. But you did mention that there's a lot of big spreads this week. That is usually tough for the book, because in those cases, we're going to need a team like the Titans to at least cover, or one of those to win out. Weeks like this are the ones that the book can get fall really, really far behind if all those favorites end up winning.
Thursday Night Football, a little bit of a smaller point spread, divisional game similar to Tennessee and Houston. The 8-2 Steelers coming off of that upset win over Baltimore in first place in the AFC North. Fourth best odds to win the AFC. That was crazy when I saw that this morning, just because who would have thunk that this late in the season, especially their win total was at 8.5. So one of the teams that have outperformed the market's expectations so far, about to climb over their preseason win total. 3.5-point favorites against the Browns on Thursday night. Cleveland sitting at 2-8. Mike Tomlin, the favorite to win Coach of the Year at plus 325. TJ Watt, the odds-on favorite to win Defensive Player of the Year. So if any significant bets come in on the point spread or total, lowest total of the week at 36.5.
So yeah, Steelers Browns. For this one, we have actually been getting a little bit more Browns money with Jameis playing as opposed to when it was Deshaun Watson playing. But so far it hasn't been the case. Steelers have been getting majority of the action so far, probably about 80-85% of the early money. I do probably can expect that to stay the same. Steelers have been one of our more bet-on teams over the past year for sure, and then over the past couple of years. We do have a bunch of fierce Steelers backers, I guess, because we consistently take money on them, and they are a liability for us on the futures market as well.
Yeah, like I mentioned, one of the best odds to win the AFC. Russell Wilson, if we look at player props for Thursday Night Football, minus 130 to throw 0 picks. And he only has 2 picks, to be fair, in 4 games as the Steelers starting quarterback, and he's facing a banged-up Browns secondary. So anything with the quarterbacks, you mentioned Winston performing well against the Saints last week despite Cleveland getting blown out in New Orleans, or Wilson, or across the board, what stands out player prop-wise for Thursday Night Football?
Yeah, I can talk about the 2 quarterbacks. Early action, we've seen over action on their initial passing yard props. Russell Wilson was at 177 passing yards. That got bet up very quick. We're up to 190. Same story with Jameis Winston. His initial passing yardage, I think, was around 217, 212. That was bet up already to this point too. So even on a Thursday night, people, I guess, are expecting more passing yards than initially projected.
Yeah, kind of juxtaposed to the total with it being the lowest of the week. So I mentioned Mike Tomlin, favored to win Coach of the Year. So pretty good transition here to the biggest liability in that market. It's Dan Campbell and the Detroit Lions, favored to win Super Bowl 59 for the first time all season. Detroit plus 325 in that market. 7.5-point favorites on Sunday afternoon against the Colts. Both teams rank top 2 in against the spread records this season. The Lions 8-2 ATS. Indianapolis 8-3. Huge game for the Colts after upsetting the Jets last week with Anthony Richardson replacing Joe Flacco. We touched on that game here on Behind the Lines, and only one game behind the Broncos for the 7th seed in the AFC playoff picture. So pretty critical game here for Indianapolis. Detroit, a public darling all season long. You mention it every week, Christian, how much liability piles up, not only for the Lions to win the big game, but to win their given matchup. And I'm guessing it's no different here. So how much action have you taken on the Colts so far? I'm assuming it's more than the Titans comparing the 2-point spreads.
Yeah, it's a little bit more than the Titans, but as I've mentioned on this this entire year, the book hates the Lions. They've been our worst team week in and week out. Last week they were by far our worst outcome. The Lions losing was even worse than the Texans in primetime, with primetime games getting more money. Lions were still our worst outcome. I imagine that will be the case this week, especially the fact that they tend to blow out teams when they have these big 7-point spreads. I think in both of their games where they were double-digit favorites this season, they won by 48 points. So I'd imagine we'll have people betting the 7.5, and I bet we'll still get people 13.5 and probably some 17.5s being bet as well. So if they win by more than 7.5, it's not going to be good for the book.
Yeah, tail outcome theory coming into play there. So sticking with Detroit before we shift over to another NFC North team or teams, Jared Goff, the biggest liability to win NFL MVP at plus 600, but Josh Allen becoming the favorite after that incredible touchdown against the Chiefs to ice the game. Plus 150, the Bills quarterback sitting at the favorite in that market. Like I mentioned, Lamar Jackson plus 200 after losing outright in Pittsburgh. So those two quarterbacks ahead of Goff, and behind Goff, you have Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts, both sitting at plus 1,400. What is the best outcome for BetMGM Sportsbook, though, in this particular market?
Of realistic options, Mahomes actually surprisingly would be our best outcome. I don't think he probably really has much of a chance outside of his name. If you just put his stats with a different name, I don't think he'd actually really be in this conversation. I mean, a lot of it is also whoever gets the 1 seed does tend to have a much better chance of having that MVP. So that ends up why he's sitting there. But pretty much anyone outside of the players you mentioned would be good enough for this, especially for awards. Awards are usually tough for the books. So outside of Goff, Jaden Daniels, and then a new one that has entered is Saquon Barkley. We have a ton of liability on him because a lot of people got him at 100 to 1+. So those are the three, I guess I would say, realistic ones that we're trying to avoid, and anything else, we're good with it.
So back to the NFC North. Detroit in first place in that division. Minnesota right behind them. 8-2 straight up, 7-3 against the spread, and heading to Chicago, Soldier Field, to face the Bears. Regret to inform you, Christian, I didn't bet the Bears last week. I mentioned I was thinking about it. Should have, could have, would have, but I didn't do it. Luckily, though, I probably would have sprinkled a little bit on the money line, and we saw what happened late in that game. The Bears losing in Bears fashion like only Chicago sports teams can do. I'm very familiar with these outcomes, living in Chicago, growing up here in the Windy City. But the market has bet down the Bears this week like they did against the Packers. Chicago closing 5.5-point dogs in that game, almost winning outright. The Bears down from 4.5-point underdogs against Minnesota at home once again. 3.5 and a juice 3.5 at that at BetMGM, total of 39.5. Bettors clearly liked what they saw from Caleb Williams on Sunday, and conversely, Sam Darnold up to 14 turnovers on the season. He's also accrued the second most turnover-worthy plays this year, according to Pro Football Focus. Curious what the handle is like for this game, and where do you expect the number to close, with the market, at least sharp bettors, clearly drifting in Chicago's direction?
Yeah, I do think we're probably sitting at the number that we're going to end up being. So you did mention that this number's got bet down early action when we were at 4.5. We did get some Bears money from some sharp bettors that got us down to this 3.5. My guess is we're going to stay here, and then my guess is also that the money is going to start to reverse and come back towards the Vikings in this one. As you mentioned last week, one of our best outcomes of the week was the Bears. We did not get a lot of bets. You didn't bet it. No one else did either. So that one was one of our better ones, and I do probably expect that to stay the same. There's seeming to be a little bit still of a sour taste for the Bears, even though they probably should have won that game last week, and I think that might have changed things. But the public always kind of looks at last week as a big barometer as to what they're going to bet. So my guess is that we'll end up with Vikings money, and I do think it'll stay at this 3.5.
Yeah, interesting to note, too, if the Bears had beat the Packers, I don't want to say this for sure, but more than likely, the hook's probably off the board at this point, and it's sitting at a flat 3. So worth noting, if you're looking to back the Bears for consecutive weeks, you may still be getting a little bit of value on top of the fact that the Bears offense performed well, but excluding turnover-worthy plays or plays with turnovers this season, the Packers allowing the highest drop-back success rate according to RBDSM, and the Vikings rank 5th in that department. So clearly a much stiffer test for Caleb Williams against a Brian Flores blitz-heavy defense, on top of the fact, too, that Flores has a week's worth of tape with Thomas Brown calling plays, replacing Shane Waldron as the Bears offensive coordinator. But rounding out the NFC North, Christian, Green Bay, 2.5-point favorites, up from -1.5 on Monday afternoon. Total of 48 against the 49ers in a rematch of their divisional round matchup going to last postseason. Seems like these two teams play in the playoffs almost every year or every other year. And George Kittle could be back for the 49ers offense. Big news after practicing in limited fashion and missing the Seahawks game where San Francisco lost outright to Seattle. 49ers didn't look right on that side of the ball against clearly a much improved Seahawks defense with Mike McDonald leading the way coming off the bye. So what's the handle look like for this game for the point spread or total with money wagered?
Yeah, so you mentioned that line moved from 1.5 to 2.5, so we did see some sharp action that got us to go in that direction towards Green Bay. But when I'm looking at it now, we are at the moment taking San Fran on the money line and Packers on the spread. So if you think San Fran's going to win, people aren't concerned about the points. They think they'll just win straight up. I do project this to probably be a 50-50 game for us, one where the book probably doesn't really have a need in either direction. I think we'll probably get pretty good two-way action now. It might be from kind of what I said, we might get a lot of 49ers money line backers and then Packers on the spread. So if we could get the Packers by under 2, that would probably be ideal for the book. But yeah, as of right now, sharp early, got us to 2.5, and now it's fizzled out and we're getting at 50-50.
Yeah, I mentioned Packers defense, Packers secondary in particular, vulnerable outside of forcing turnovers. So Purdy getting Kittle back, definitely worth noting for San Francisco's passing offense in this game, despite the fact that it's on the road and who knows what kind of weather conditions. Could be windy like it was in Week 11 in the Midwest. As you all know by now, we've teamed up with BetMGM this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we'll have special offers for our listeners each week. If you haven't signed up with BetMGM yet, use promo code THELINES, that's the lines one word, and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code THELINES. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game. You'll then receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your first bet loses. Just make sure to use bonus code THELINES when you sign up. See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Available in the U.S. Call 8778-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369 in New York. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona, 1-800-327-5050 in Massachusetts, 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa, and 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. First bet offer for new customers only. subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire within 7 days. In partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. Don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code THELINES and get your $1,500 first bet offer today. So looking ahead to Monday Night Football, Christian, to wrap up the handle conversation, at least for individual games, the Harbaugh Bowl on Monday Night Football with the Ravens favored by a field goal. Jim Harbaugh against John Harbaugh. And before we look at the handle for this game, I want to go back to Sunday Night Football because a monster swing, I'm assuming, with the Chargers' epic win over the Bengals. Missed opportunities left and right for both teams. Evan McPherson, by the way, the Bengals place kicker, has missed 4 kicks in 4 different games, 4 different one-score losses this season, and the Bengals are 1-6 in one-score games. So what kind of outcome was it like for the book with that great game on Sunday Night Football with the Chargers as short favorites pulling it out late?
Yeah, that was a huge swing because of the fact that it was pretty close to a pick 'em. We pretty much just needed the Chargers to win. And that actually pretty much swung the whole week. It was one of our better winning outcomes outside of that Bears game. And because we had a couple ones that beat us up pretty good in the Lions and the Texans, that if that one would have went the other direction, it probably would have ended up being a losing week. So it did end up being a huge swing for us.
So back to Ravens-Chargers, total sitting at 50.5. I mentioned Baltimore, field goal favorite. Expectation on what you may need side and total for this game?
Yeah, I was thinking that because of how good the Chargers looked against, I know the Bengals record isn't good, but they are still, a pretty good team. So I did expect to see a lot more Chargers action early on, just because of the fact that they looked good and the Ravens, the Ravens lost and didn't look great either. So, usually those things tend to, like I said, the public always kind of looks at what happened last week. But no, as of this point, it's mostly Ravens bets. A lot of that might just be off the fact that this is at a -3 and, thinking that if this does go to 3.5, people try to jump on early and try to get that key number. I don't know if it'll go to 3.5. I think there's a pretty good chance we might end up staying here at 3. So that's my guess as to why the early action so far has come on the Ravens. I would like to think that we get, at least not a super lopsided game, probably 70% on the Ravens as we get to kick off next week. But the Ravens this season have taken a ton of bets, especially from the public side. So maybe that does continue.
Yeah, and I mentioned earlier on in the show all the touchdown underdogs, touchdown favorites in Week 12. Similarly, for the 13-point spreads around the key number of a field goal, and Monday night is no exception. You mentioned some sharp action coming in earlier in the show. Any other games that stand out in that regard? Bigger bets earlier in the week?
Yeah, we've taken a little bit on the Cardinals. That's a little bit of the sharper side. It was slightly towards the Seahawks, and now it's going a little bit back toward the Cardinals. This one could go back and forth a little bit. That was the main one I saw. A lot of times it's around the key numbers that the sharps early on try to get. So if you see something that's sitting at a 7.5, it might have been 7 right when we first opened, and then we've gone, back towards that direction. So, yeah.
And Arizona coming off the bye, facing a potentially emotionally drained Seahawks team, but then again, they could be revitalized back in the NFC West hunt, as seemingly every team in that division is, to win it. What about for you? Any bets that stick out on the Week 12 board?
Yeah, I like 2 of them, and they're both in very weird zones. I like the Bucks at -5 against the Giants.
Going against Tommy DeVito.
Going against Tommy DeVito. It's tough with my last name being Cipollini going against the Italian. I don't know if I'm even allowed to do that. But I think but I think this Bucks team has looked a little bit better, and they've kept games close even without Evans and Godwin. So I think against this Giants team, I think they'll be able to keep it more than a touchdown. And the other game that I like, Broncos-Raiders, this one I'm going to have to plug my nose, but I do like the Raiders in this one against the Broncos, coming off a pretty big win. I think they fall back to earth a little bit. Division games tend to be closer, so I'll take that 5.5 and plug my nose because it's not fun to bet on a bad team like the Raiders.
Yeah, I want to say, didn't the Raiders, for a brief moment on Sunday, open around the key number 3? And that line has spiked dramatically after Raiders arguably could have covered against the Dolphins last Sunday.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of that tends to be from how the Broncos ended up playing. I mean, they looked very good. They just absolutely destroyed the Falcons. So that was how that line jumped up. Some bets there. But sticking with what my gut here in these division games, stay close, and I think the Raiders will keep it there. We'll see.
Yeah, I may be with you on Las Vegas. Maybe the first time this season that we're on the same side. I know I won't be with you on Tampa Bay, but I will say, in your defense, and rightfully so, public will be there with you on the Bucs.
Yes.
Coming off the bye against below average Giants team that could be tanking for all we know with Tommy DeVito at quarterback.
Yeah, exactly. That's probably a little bit part of it. I think they seem to be incentivized to lose at this point, jumping their second string quarterback and going right to the third string. So, yeah.
He is Christian Cipollini, trading manager at BetMGM Sportsbook. I'm Eli Hershkovich. Christian, always appreciate the insight, man.
Anytime. Good luck to everyone this week.
This edition of Behind the Lines presented by BetMGM and TheLines.com. Thanks for watching and listening. So long, everybody, and good luck with your NFL Week 12 picks.